Hello and welcome to Undercommon Taste. This is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs.
Carnival Row is us looking at the stranger. Curiosity is the stranger looking at us.
I'm Ian Woodworth. I'm joined by my co-host James Daly, and today we are going to grab that episode topic that James mentioned wanting to do last time and run with it.
Huzzah!
Yeah, we deferred this so that we could fulfill a promise to my daughter of getting a dragon episode last time. So we are going to pick up and take care of the episode topic that James wanted to do now, which is talking a little bit about festivals.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming up. It is now officially, when this comes out, we'll be a week into spring. So huzzah for that. Mardi Gras has just passed. We have other festivals coming up. And honestly, whenever Mardi Gras comes up, I immediately think of a cask of Amontillado. That's just like right there in the forefront. And I've always thought, just that Mardi Gras season, everyone's in masks. Most people are somewhat inebriated. Everyone's celebratory. People are shirking off responsibilities and duties. There's generally some sort of religious tie into a lot of these. You can do so much story-wise, and especially as Ian and I are trying to push more towards system agnostic type scenarios and builds up, doing things like Old Gods of Appalachia, Kids on Bikes, Powered by the Apocalypse. You can do so much because it's not just your everyday stuff, but everything is kind of amped up. And the spirit of access and the spirit of celebration, where things are a little different every day, is totally embraced in these festival seasons.
Right. And one of the nice things about festivals is festivals in and of themselves are system agnostic because everybody celebrates festivals everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't matter whether you're talking about Bronze Age humanity, whether you're talking about some spacefaring alien race, whether you're talking about some medieval themed fantasy setting, pod people.
Cyberpunk, yeah.
Yeah, cyberpunk, somewhere in the dystopian future. Everybody's got something that they are celebrating. Everyone's got some event that they celebrate.
And everyone's going to have that kind of built up on that wanting to blow off steam too. And it's that release of all of that tension as well.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes the buildup of tension.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes a festival is just there to rile up the masses.
Yeah, and so I really we've brushed against festivals before. We've done a couple things where we've talked about them loosely, but I really wanted to take the time and stop and appreciate the festival season end game.
Yeah, I was actually going back and looking because we did do an episode similar to this a while ago. I think it was like episode 123, 129, somewhere in there. It was November 2023. This is when we were talking about creating holidays specifically. And while festivals tend to happen during holidays, they are not mutually exclusive, nor are they mutually inclusive. So you can have a festival without some sort of holiday and vice versa.
Right. One of the things when Ian and I was planning is we've got March Madness going on right now. And if you're really into sports, people have their bracket pools and things like that going on. You had the Super Bowl in February. And look at the huge parade when the Eagles came home because they won. And that's a huge festival. Has nothing to do with any given holiday. It's like, hey, our team won and we're celebrating we won a big thing. We won a battle. We found an achievement. We discovered a new mine.
Yeah, the harvest was particularly successful this year.
Exactly.
And then on the other side, you have stuff like Valentine's Day, where it is a holiday, but you don't tend to have a festival surrounding it. It tends to be far more personal and far less group-oriented.
Yes.
So yeah, those are the two ends of that spectrum. A festival without a holiday and a holiday without a festival. But there is a lot of overlap there in the middle. They do tend to coincide a lot.
Yes. And the ones I can think of, and again, they generally happen around this time of year, particularly close to Easter, close to Christmas, especially in the European tradition, but where they bring out the huge relics and they just walk the relics from one church to another or one shrine to another. Sometimes it's the only time that people get to see this particular holy relic, whatever it is. I know, and I don't know the full meaning and symbolism behind the one in Japan they have every year, but they have a huge parade of phalluses. It's the phallus holiday, and people are walking around. They've got giant, rubber ones and paper mache ones and phallus floats. And why not?
How very Roman of them.
Exactly. Yes.
No,
That's not
I
for
kid.
everyone.
Yeah. I kid because it does not necessarily have to have anything, nor does it necessarily have anything to do with Rome or Roman concepts.
No,
You know, dick jokes are universal,
absolutely.
and they can happen anywhere. The Romans did not have to bring them dick jokes.
No. But again, these are things that happen. Again, a particularly good harvest, the wedding of royals or celebrities, people celebrate that. I mean, absolutely the point. The birth of an heir, cementing a dynasty or a line was absolutely because that was stability. Because if there was not stability, you were looking at civil war whenever the crown died. And now, okay, we've got, at least maybe another 10, 15, 40 years of relative peace.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the more specifics on, generating your festivals. So, as you have mentioned, most festivals have a reason behind them. There is a reason why you're getting together. The reason could be as simple as we survived the winter.
Hey,
We
great reason.
survived the winter. Let's celebrate.
The long gray is over.
Yes.
Seasonal
I
depression
am
is
so glad
done.
that everything is starting to warm up.
Yes.
But yeah, that is a very common thing. And, given when a lot of the major holidays, especially in Western European traditions, given when most of the holidays fall, they fall around the winter solstice and around the spring equinox.
Yeah.
Which, winter solstice, this is this big celebration that we're having, tying back to the pagan traditions that the Christians co-opted for means of conversion. Not to get cynical about anything or anything, but this was their attempt at enticing the sun to come back so that winter would end.
Yeah, because it's getting cold and like, don't leave us. No, we got this for you. No, come on back. Come back.
Right.
It'll be good. I promise.
And that's the whole reason why we put Christmas trees in our houses and we light them up. That you're bringing life and light into the home. You are enticing the sun to come back. And then with the spring equinox, you've got the pagan holiday of Ostara. I mean, it varies depending on the culture, but most of your what we would consider primitive cultures were very closely tied to celestial movements, and they would be able to tell you exactly when certain celestial events would happen. I mean, we can tell that from any number of standing Neolithic religious structures, temples and such, the way that they're oriented. They're oriented to where when the sun rises on a certain day, usually, summer solstice or the winter solstice or the equinox, it comes up and it shines through a specific window or lines up with a specific stone in all of this structure. And they would have been tied to that. And these events would have had very strong cultural significance, religious significance to them. Because at this point, at the spring equinox, that means that winter is basically done.
Yeah. And
This is where we can reliably start planting and start gathering, and the animals are having their young and the new crops are starting to come up and the fruit trees are starting to flower, and all of the things that are proving that we are going to have what we need to survive yet another year are making themselves known. And that is why we celebrate.
Yeah, I was going to come in that. I mean, obviously, aside from the astrological significance of, solstice and equinox, this is the time of year too. Equinox is when you start seeing, like locally, it's been cold, the weather's been up and down all over the place. But as I drive, I see daffodils on the side of the road, and that is a sure sign. Hey, spring's coming. We have these shrubs that have these yellow flowers called forsythia, also a strong sign. Bradford pears, as troublesome as they are, they're blooming now. Another sure sign of spring. And this is also part of that kind of keeping a calendar which is a huge point within civilization as well. But yeah, absolutely. Now is the time for that rebirth. Now is time for planting and preparing, but things are getting better. Especially as, I joke and call the winter the long gray because everything is kind of dull and drab and icy and the leaves are all gone. Those leaves are coming back. That color's coming back. We are getting in the northern hemisphere more sunshine every day. And this is one of those things that people plan their years via. I mean, even the old Farmer's Almanac, based off a lot of these type of things.
Right, yeah. And so the sort of things that you're going to have at these festivals, let's talk a bit about that.
Okay.
Because a lot of these festivals are going to have the things that you're going to see at the festivals are going to be directly related to the thing that the festival is about. So they're going to be topical, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. So like for anything having to do with the harvest, you're going to have a bunch of food. If it's something celebrating surviving the winter, you're probably also going to have a lot of food.
Yeah, you're going to eat what's left of your stores because you're sure more's coming up. In spring, you're going to be dealing with a lot of colorful stuff. So there's probably going to be a lot of costume, celebration.
Flowers are probably going to be very prominent.
Absolutely. So yeah, flowers, costume, masks. And I do want to come back to this as we start trying to develop, stories and things we can do. This kind of like concealing personality and changing in and out can definitely be a big thing you can use for your players.
Yeah. And especially whenever we're talking about things like springtime, if we were monetized, this is where we would risk losing our monetization. There are lots of, shall we say, carnal endeavors that tend to happen around this time as well.
Jonathan Colton has the amazing First of May song. If you've not heard it, look it up. It's a good laugh.
Just don't do it at work.
Yes. No, definitely not at work. Probably not when littles are around.
Yeah, because you will absolutely have some explaining to do.
Yeah.
And so unless you're wanting to give the birds and the bees talk after listening to an entertaining song, make sure that the children aren't around at the time. But it is a very common thing. It is something that you see and hear about a lot in a lot of fantasy media is, we have these springtime rites. And as a result, somebody gets pregnant. It is a time of fertility.
Yes, it is.
And, there are plenty of, because I've been reading a lot more folk horror stuff, especially British folk horror. And there are a lot of instances where they're talking about there being like a taboo about actually getting pregnant on the equinox. Like there are certain supernatural reasons why you don't want to actually get pregnant on the equinox.
Yeah, this makes sense. And so if you even go back to like Babylonian traditions, this was, springtime and around equinox was one of the times where the king would go, and part of the celebrations is he would sleep with the high priestess, and it was for fertility for the kingdom and for of the upcoming crops. And so, a fall baby, because spring 9 months later, was not uncommon. But again, so there are these kinds of religious tie-ins that the god of the Babylonians would indwell, and that king would, for that moment, become the god, the godhead, the god figure. And the high priestess would become the goddess figure, quite literally incarnate, and they would have a union for the people. And this kind of tradition does carry through in Europe too. And so that there was a metaphysical type thing. So if you became impregnated on, some of these high holy holidays, that there was people were looking like, was it you, or was there a supernatural stand-in that took your place without you knowing it?
Right. I mean, I don't know enough about actual mythological superstitions or religious practices to really say one way or another which cultures believed it was a good thing, which cultures believed it was something to be avoided, and this and that. But it is definitely a recurring theme that a child conceived on one of these days of celestial importance was a child that was going to be different in some way, whether for good or for ill.
Yes. And again, whatever game system you're running, be it D&D and you want to, have some fae, In the Feywilds, if you're running, again, kids on bikes, if you're running Monster of the Week even would actually be really interesting. This is a good time to bring in a lot of your Fey lore because, again, they are going to want to be present at this time of year. And again, talking about people in masks and people, representing themselves as something else, these monsters, these cryptids, whatever you have, this would be a time for them to try to mingle with the everyday populace.
Yeah, I mean, you could end up having things like, a child conceived during a lunar eclipse is destined to become a werewolf.
Yeah.
Or maybe something to go the other way, maybe during a solar eclipse is the only time when a vampire can conceive.
Ooh, good call. I like that one.
Because these are celestial events that you can predict. They are somewhat regular. They happen under very specific circumstances. These are things that can be planned for and things that would allow for certain parties to have a vested interest in whether or not this copulation happens.
No, I like that. Yeah, I absolutely like that. And so the other thing we want to examine is like what kind of things are going to happen during these festivities. Like, again, is it going to be a parade? Is there going to be a song and dance? Is there going to be some sort of talent contest? I think a great one that I love is, in Spain, you have the running of the bulls. How exciting is that? Every year we're just going to get a bunch of huge angry animals and you're going to try to run in front of them for as long as you can.
Although I think they have banned the running of the bulls at this point. I don't think
Have they
Pamplona
actually
does that anymore.
have they actually banned the actual running?
I think so. I
Wow.
remember them talking about doing it several years ago, but I don't know if they've actually done that.
Yeah, I know they've largely gone away with the bullfights, which I totally understand. And I've talked about bullfighting before. It is harsh. I have seen Mexican bullfighting, which is amazing, which instead of actually like stabbing the bull, they put a giant Velcro vest on the bull. And I forget what the small swords are called, but they're just basically Velcro stickums. And that's kind of interesting to watch. And it's really neat.
Right.
And it does not harm the animals. And I do appreciate that.
So,
Going back. Oh, go
so
ahead.
apparently I was wrong. I did look that up. They do still have the running of the bulls.
Okay.
This year it is going to be July 7th through 14th.
Before the running of the bulls, I think it's like a week or two before in Spain also, they have a giant tomato fight. I have no idea the history behind this thing. I just know that people get up in the city and like it starts by someone having to knock a ham off of a greased pole. And once that ham falls, people just start hucking tomatoes at each other. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
I'd do it.
I remember reading about it at one point, but I cannot remember. I think it has something, because most of these have something to do with like a familial conflict, like a conflict between two families or between two, rival households.
It's Spain.
And
It makes sense.
yeah, and it would not surprise me in the least if this is the result of like two farmer families that got into an argument with one another and just started hucking tomatoes at each other. And it just became a thing.
Honestly, that's very possible. And if not, even within a game system, that is a perfect way to, this is what we do. Here are our Hatfields and McCoys or whoever they are. And this is what we do just to kind of remind us of that old feud that once was. Here in America on the 4th of July, the celebration of with fireworks. It's this huge display, and you can have wizards or artificers doing whatever, and people being distracted. And I mean, people gathered to watch these fireworks. And maybe as your kids on bikes, you have to do something and switch out these fireworks because the fireworks are going to do something like nefarious. They're not fireworks, but within the fireworks, maybe there's a torch that's going to burn down a person's building for some sort of heist or something like that. And you can do like, okay, well, you have to prevent the fireworks, or maybe you have to stop the fireworks from being prevented.
Or if you're playing something like a Cyberpunk or a Shadowrun game, maybe somebody slipped a nuke into the fireworks display.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm thinking of Coneheads, where he has that one little itty bitty rocket and it's like that astral burst.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that'd be perfect. Or maybe, again, going with that with the Cyberpunk is maybe the fireworks, maybe there's an EMP that's going to knock out certain cybernetics or certain fields that way. And so you need to prevent that from happening. Or maybe that's the way you're going to sneak it in so you can get past security.
Or another thing could be, say, you are an agent for this one household that is trying to get the contract to do fireworks displays and such. But this other company or this other family has that contract. And so your job is to get onto the barge. Like, was it San Diego that had
Oh
the.
yeah, the Alpha Strike.
Yeah, where for whatever reason the computer program that was running the barge full of fireworks malfunctioned and fired off everything at once.
Yeah.
So we're talking a 20-minute fireworks show going off in 6 seconds.
Yep.
So you have something like that go off where your job is to go and sabotage the fireworks display to discredit the company that is running the fireworks show so that your company that you are an agent for can pick up the contract so that the city will drop their current contract.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And you could end up having it be like that with the barge in San Diego, where it just fires off all of the fireworks at once and it makes this giant blinding light and deafening kaboom. Or it could be far more destructive, kind of like the explosion that we saw in Beirut like 10 years ago, where the warehouse that was full of fertilizer and fireworks caught fire and blew up and flattened like a quarter-mile radius of the
Yes.
city of Beirut and
Right.
was terribly destructive.
Yeah,
I mean, you could go either way with that.
absolutely. Another fun thing to consider if you're setting up this festival for your players to go through is how your people are going to react. So, like your regular NPCs, are they going to be in a better mood because they're excited, or are they going to be in a sour mood? One way to do it would be like, maybe everyone gets a bonus to their charisma rolls because everyone's excited, but then this fireworks show your party does sabotage this fireworks show, and it either goes off like that Alpha Strike we talked about, or maybe it just completely fizzles and doesn't go off at all. And now everyone's angry. And so now whenever you're dealing with an NPC, you're taking like a -2 or -3 to your charisma rolls because they're disappointed by the lack of this celebration has been ruined. Another celebration that, comes up is sometimes sadly we celebrate loss. Like the Pope's been sick. Thankfully he's better now. But when the Pope passes, and people go to the Vatican to wait for the selection of a new Pope, but people mourn the death of the Pope. And so they're not going to be like, hey, I've got a great deal for you. They're going to be sad. They're going to be morose. And so changing the mood and the demeanor of your NPCs based around this festival can be a strong tool as well.
Yeah, prominent religious figures, prominent secular governmental figures. We saw that I think it was last year with the death of Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
England was basically shut down for a whole week for the mourning and the ceremony surrounding the funeral of Queen Elizabeth and then the coronation of King Charles.
Absolutely. And again, this is more US centric, but look how people reacted when people like Elvis or Michael Jackson or John Lennon died. So the death of a bard, and people are mourning this loss of musical talent or storytelling. I've seen people cry when musicians have passed, and it's not an uncommon thing.
Yeah, I mean, we have a friend of ours who got real torn up when Eddie Van Halen died.
Yeah. Was it Van Halen?
Yes, Eddie Van Halen.
Okay. I was thinking, who's the lead singer from Alice in Chains? Blah. That's another one that I recall that we have a mutual friend that got really broken up over as well. Lane Staley? Lane Staley, I think, is who it was. I gotta look it up.
Yeah, I'm drawing a complete blank on that one.
Yeah, it was Lane Staley.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the only name that was coming to mind was Keith Richards, and I was like, I know that's not right.
No, Keith Richards is a lich.
Yeah, he's a mummy lord.
Yeah.
He is a mummy lord. He has already pickled and preserved all of his organs. It's like, I remember, God, must have been 10, 15 years ago now, where there's a news story where he survived falling out of a palm tree. Like,
How?
He was climbing a palm tree and he fell out of it and survived.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's like, he is immortal. It's like those memes that were floating around, forever ago. It was a picture of Sean Connery from 1986 or whenever, when Raiders of the
Calendar?
Lost Ark
Oh,
is
okay.
this headshot from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then a second picture from I think 2008 where he looks basically the same, and the caption is, "When you hit max level, you stop leveling."
Right.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of things with Keith Richards.
Absolutely. But yeah, no, the death of a bard can absolutely be a thing that people might gather to mourn. And so a mourning celebration, for lack of a better term, or a mourning gathering, awake. If you had, you're in a small hamlet or village and, again, a very notable person, maybe a blacksmith or just someone that the town admired or a local hero. And so they're having a wake for this hero.
And, depending on your cultures, in Irish culture, a wake is a very boisterous thing
Yeah.
because the whole thing is you're trying to be jovial and you're trying to be festive because you're trying to keep away the evil spirits that are going to try and come and steal the body's soul. But you're also trying to make sure that they're actually dead.
Yeah. If
That
we're having enough
they're
fun, they might wake up and join us.
Exactly. And and if they're, because this particular tradition stemmed from a time whenever medical science was not nearly as advanced as it is now, someone could fall off a ladder and hit their head and go into a coma, and it would look like they're dead, and you would think that they're dead. And if you didn't have that wake, they might come to.
Yeah.
So it was rare but not unheard of for someone to, have a wake and wake up, which
Right.
is why it's called Awake, you know?
So Ian actually had figured out like a mini game that would be really fun for festivals. And these are the types of things too that you're going to have some games, you're going to have these festivals. So even if you're not just trying to do a heist or some sort of espionage or sneaking in, there are going to be things for your players to do during these festivals. And Ian had a really solid idea, so I'm going to let him take it off from there.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about, getting this episode together earlier today, I thought about one of the things that you see a lot in a lot of festivals, especially festivals that are surrounding food, are eating contests. And so I was figuring out a set of rules that we can use for governing an eating contest. And as I'm figuring it out, there are basically three main goals to an eating contest. Either you are trying to eat as much as possible in a set period of time, you are trying to eat a set amount of something in the fastest time possible, or you are just trying to be the last person still eating.
So with this, I call this either amount, endurance, or speed.
Right. Yeah. And so because of all of that, this is absolutely going to be something that falls into, in D&D it would be a constitution check. This is your body's ability to endure hardship. In terms of overeating. In other systems, you're going to be using different stats. So do what you will on whatever you happen to have. And you're probably going to have to adjust mechanics as you need to. But the mechanics on this are fairly simple, so it should be fairly easy to translate.
Yeah, the framework's here.
Yeah, the framework's here. So basically, you start off each round. The first round is a DC 10 con check. You roll, you either succeed or fail. Whenever you succeed, you move on to the next round without any consequences. Whenever you fail, you start accruing consequences. So the first consequence that you have is you lose whatever your con bonus is to your roll. So if you had a +2 to your con, no, you don't.
Fair.
Not anymore. It's a flat roll from here on out. The second failure, now you're rolling at disadvantage.
Okay.
And at the third failure, you yak. You're done. The system hits the purge button and you are disqualified.
I love that.
And so you start off, the first round is a DC 10 and it increases by 1 each round because as the contest goes on, you get more and more full and it's harder and harder to keep forcing the food in there.
And these rules are fairly close to the drinking rules we came up with forever ago as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And as I was working on, I was like, this is very similar to our drinking game rule.
Yeah, it was.
And so basically, as it goes on, if you're going for speed, or you're going for quantity, you keep track of the value of your roll because that is basically your score. So if you're trying to eat as many hot dogs as you can in 1 minute, or in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and let's say you have 10 rounds, however long you decide a round is for this, you have 10 rounds to eat as many hot dogs as possible. Each time you make your roll, the result of your roll is how many hot dogs you ate in that round. And your goal is to get the highest number you possibly can.
And so you're rolling, but you still have that risk of if you roll under that con score, that con DC score, you are still going to pick up your failures. And so it goes through. This was a brilliant idea from Ian, is that, if you're going and you're rolling gold, you're rolling, 18s and 19s, and you're doing great, and you get to round 8 and you roll that 1. And we talked about 1 counting as 2 failures.
Yes.
Do you stop and pause and let everyone catch up, or do you roll that dice thinking I can push it for 2 more rounds?
Right, because at that point where you're picking up a 1 on every roll, once you get to round 8, round 9 is a DC 18.
Yeah.
And so if you've got 2 failures and you've got, out of a possible, if you rolled a perfect score and you have a maximum bonus on your rolls, a maximum 250 points, which would be absolutely insane. That would be a natural 20 with a +5 con on every single roll.
I'm checking your dice.
That's not going to happen. But let's just say that having a 200 would be an insanely good score. Let's say that you've got, 150, 160 points at the end of round 8 and 2 failures. I would say, you can decide, no, I'm done, and sit there comfy on your 160 points, because next person in line might only have 130 points.
Yeah.
They have to figure out a way to accrue 30 points over the next 2 rounds. So that means that either they don't have any failures yet at all, which would be very difficult at this stage. But let's say that somebody doesn't have any failures at all. They would have to succeed on both of those next 2 rolls in order to hit 30 points to meet or beat you.
Yeah.
But if they do already have at least 1 failure, which is pretty likely, they might hit 3 failures and be disqualified trying to get to your score to beat you.
Yeah.
It becomes a numbers game at that point, and you're like, I'm sitting comfy on my big lead. I'm just going to go ahead and bow out and ride this score until the end.
Absolutely.
And then trying to eat a set volume as quickly as possible. So let's say you have to sit down and eat 50 hot dogs as quickly as you can. And so the results that you get on your rolls determine how many hot dogs you ate in that round.
Yeah.
And your goal is to hit 50 or higher the fastest. And so you're keeping track of your roll results for the same reason, but to a different end.
Yeah. And I like all of these. Another, festivity, obviously, like if you have some sort of, like I said, a masquerade ball is going to be a great time, especially if you're pushing more of that social role play and more role play aspects versus like combat. You're going to have these times come in and, times for like deception, disguise self, performance checks will be wonderful times to kind of throw these in. Another really neat things is, especially for a lot of these big balls, if you're doing something with like families or aristocracy, they're going to bring out family heirlooms or magical items that aren't going to be out any given time throughout the year. And so, like, if you have something for a heist that you need to switch something or steal something, or acquire a MacGuffin, whatever it is, it's probably going to be at one of these huge social venues. I'm kind of thinking, what was it, the Faramir in Skyrim, where they're having that big kind of social to do?
No, the Thalmor.
Thalmor, yes, that's what it is. In Skyrim, but one of those big, and you're kind of going through and schmoozing and trying to, get information from people that wouldn't otherwise be mixing or wouldn't otherwise talk to your players in any other given situation.
Yeah, and we also, I hesitate to keep going back to Critical Role because it is such a polarizing but large player in the actual play podcasting community. But Critical Role, they had a big masquerade ball near the beginning of campaign 3.
Oh, I missed that one. I need to go back and watch campaign 3.
Yeah, it was somewhere around episode 10 or 11, I think.
Okay.
I didn't get very far into campaign 3, and apparently they have just wrapped campaign 3. So,
Oh, huzzah.
so good for them.
Yes.
Maybe if they decide to do another thing, I think they're planning on doing another game campaign using a different game system.
Are they going to use their own? I think they were
I think
creating
they're
their
going to
own.
be using their own, was it Daggerheart?
I think so, something like that, yeah.
But if they do that, I really, really hope that they move to shorter fucking episodes.
Yeah, it is hard to catch up on a 3-hour episode.
I cannot devote the time necessary to listen to or watch 3 to 4 hour episodes.
Fair. Yeah.
I don't have the attention span for it anymore.
Yeah, no,
It's
that is an issue.
It was great whenever I didn't have any responsibilities and I could just sit down and veg out and listen to an actual play for 4 hours. That was great.
It was amazing during COVID, and God bless them for having, what they had done, and for me to go back and delve into it during COVID, because, yeah, that was needed medicine at the time.
But 4-hour episodes is too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, speaking as us who did 2-part planar episodes that were 2 hours each, so they were technically 4-hour episodes. 4-hour episodes are too much.
Yes, they were. But again,
they were fun, but they were way too much.
Yes, but again, there's a lot of things you can do with these festivities. If you want to do a running of the bulls, again, this would be a skills check or an ability check. And again, just kind of one of those rolling and trying to stay above a certain number unless you get trampled or someone passes you.
At that point, you could just use the chase mechanics.
Absolutely, yeah.
Use the chase mechanics. It's just that you are the one being chased and the pursuer is the bulls.
Yeah.
And so they're going to have a bonus on their rolls because they're just faster than you. And so you're going to have to figure out how to navigate the terrain and such, and do it in such a way as to stay ahead of the bulls.
I really want to play a kids on bikes game where the party, there's something going on. They know there's stuff going on. They're riding their bikes. They turn and they just ride into the middle of a running on the bulls. And I just have this mental image of kids on bikes pedaling as hard as they can with, like I said, a huge stampede of bulls behind them. And I think that would be really fun for a bunch of players, and given, the right mood, the right setting, would absolutely be, I'm almost kind of getting like Indiana Jones and the giant rolling boulder vibe.
To borrow from CinemaSins, these kids are going to the Prometheus school of running away from things.
Yes, absolutely.
I haven't watched a CinemaSins video in years.
Again, another thing too is, if it's something closer to like Christmas time, because Christmas is absolutely a festival, gift giving. And so maybe going through and a shopkeep is giving out items, and a magical item or a significant item is snuck in to like maybe 1 in 100, or you win a door prize by walking in and now you've got this item, congratulations, and everyone's celebrating. Something like Willy Wonka with the golden tickets, and your party just happens to stumble in at the right place at the right time.
Or that is why the party is together in the first place.
Oh yeah, that'd be a great idea.
They all show up to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory because they were the ones that found the golden tickets.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
They all have the invitation to the party.
I want a Kids on Bikes Willy Wonka campaign. That would be amazing. Holy crap, that would be fun.
At that point, you're getting closer to almost needing to go Kids on Brooms.
Okay.
You bring in that sort of magical fantasy aspect of it.
Yeah. But oh my God, that would be a fun setting.
It absolutely would.
Okay, making notes for projects that we need to complete at some point in time.
Yeah, if we're using Kids on Bikes / Kids on Brooms, that would put the general feel of it in the right place to give it that right sense of whimsy so it isn't super dark.
Yeah.
Because if it is Willy Wonka or something along those lines, the content is there to make it super grimdark.
Oh yeah, very much.
but the presentation is such to make it whimsical.
Yeah.
And you really need to have that whimsy or otherwise you lose the vibe.
Totes. No, I totally get that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Again, coming through with some of these celebrations, depending on what you're doing, would tie in really well with Old Gods of Appalachia as well. Like I said, some of these cryptids coming out where they could be disguised or they can kind of blend in as, no, I'm just a dude dressed up as Mothman. I'm just a guy in a Bigfoot costume. I'm not actually Bigfoot, and trying to figure things out like that would absolutely be something that'd be very doable.
I mean, they had an element of the story arc in the last season that dealt with that sort of scenario. I won't go into details because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but there were absolutely individuals whose backstory was explored who were brought into being performers in a traveling carnival show.
Would make perfect sense.
Another thing, going back to talking about gifts, very gift adjacent prizes. So you're
Yes.
going to have lots of games of skill, games of chance that will give you the opportunity to win fabulous prizes, whether they are actually fabulous prizes or just being portrayed as fabulous prizes is something completely different. And, the fabulosity of the prize is dependent on the eye of the beholder. Like, I might not want a 5 foot tall stuffed unicorn, but my daughter might absolutely love a 5 foot tall stuffed unicorn.
Very true.
It's so fluffy.
Oh my God. Yeah, and so I mean, this is really what I had and what I wanted to present to people today is just again reminding that festivals are a huge resource to bring in. Again, not everything has to be gritty combat. You can do a lot of these roles that we don't get to do. You can use skill checks, you can use con checks, and I mean, con checks totally get overlooked. You can have a lot of role play opportunity. Having your party come into a festival, especially if they've hit in something that's been fairly intense for the past 2 or 3 sessions, is a great breath of fresh air and kind of a way to reset and rejuvenate everybody as well. You can create some really strong story arcs tying into a lot of different things that your players might not even realize happened. I love even literary. You go back to Jim Butcher, Ian and I mention him a lot, but in the third book, he goes to that vampire's ball. And so many things happen in that ball that you don't find out was important until multiple books down the road. Like we're still discovering stuff that happened during that. It was like, oh, that ties way back to there. And you can build these kinds of things into your campaign and stories as well, where things just kind of keep going back to that event where everyone was there for some reason.
Yes, absolutely. And it is also a great way to throw in those sort of little ideas that you have for interesting encounters that don't have anything to do with the overarching story.
Absolutely.
That, you can have complete non sequitur encounters in a festival, and you can just have a ton of fun with them and then just act like they never happened.
Yeah.
And they have no bearing on the future of your campaign. They were just a fun little thing that everybody is going to keep talking about because they had so much fun and it was such a fond memory, but you don't have to ever revisit it.
Yeah. And that's actually a great way if you're trying to world build or you're trying to refine your game mastering, your DMing, and you want to know, like, I really want to do this one shot, but I don't know if it's going to work. Take the pieces you want, throw it in a festival and see which pieces work, get your feedback, kind of go. It's a great way to test things out.
All right. I think that pretty well does it for today, unless you've got any other things that you wanted to
No, that kind of wraps us up.
that you wanted to
Exactly.
Uh,
Indubitably.
yeah, I'm gonna have to cut so much of that. It's just me tripping on my tongue, I promise. So anyway, thank you all for listening. If you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, please send us an email undercommentaste@gmail.com or come join us on our Discord. You can find a link to our Discord on our website, undercommentaste.com. That's also where you can find links to all of our social media accounts. I have not been good about keeping up to date on our social media accounts. I need to get back on it, but life is happening and my brain is being devoted to other things like, making money.
Dollars are important. Yes.
Unfortunately, we live in a capitalist hellscape where dollars are important.
Yes.
But you can also find links there to our Patreon, patreon.com/undercommontaste, as well as our itch store, undercommontaste.itch.io. So you can go and find our stuff there as well.
If this is your first time listening, we're very happy you found us. Thank you for joining us. You can find our other podcasts on your podcatcher of choice. Just search Under Common Taste. Also, we do have a bit of a schedule change, or rather, I have a bit of a schedule change. If you would like, you can join me on twitch.com/undercommontaste on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. On Tuesdays now, instead of Mondays, Tuesdays, I will be continuing in with Darkest Dungeon. We are nearing the end of that game. As wonderful as it is, we are approaching the end. And then on Thursdays, we are playing the classic Neverwinter Nights. I am also taking input on what will replace or what we should play next after we finish our games. Our front runners are XCOM 2, which is a tactical-based game, Alien Descent, which is also a free-play tactical game, or Divine Divinity, which is actually the first of Larian Studios' Divine series, and Larian Studios is also the game studio that created Baldur's Gate 3 as well.
Yeah. Or, maybe Fallout 1.
We completed Fallout 1 last summer. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we did complete Fallout 1 last summer.
Well, then that means we have to do Fallout 2.
Possibly, yeah. Fallout 2 is also up on that list. Fallout 2 is an amazing game. I did enjoy that very much.
Anyway, stay safe, everyone. We will see you again in 2 weeks whenever we get back on our dragon kick with talk about metallic dragons.
Metal! Happy gaming.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Under Common Taste. Our theme song is Massacre Anne, written and performed by Mary Kroll and used with permission. You can find Mary online at marykroll.bandcamp.com or on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Mary C. Kroll. Our logo is by David Sutherland. You can find more of David's work on deviantart.com/David Sutherland or on instagram.com/Willex_73. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so stay safe and we'll see you then.